With less than 100 days to go until both London and Manchester marathons, I thought now would be the absolute perfect time to take you through some of my favourite marathon workouts that got me from a 2:37 marathon in 2021 to now a 2:15 personal best. I've grouped these sessions into three categories and tried to give you some ways that you can modify these sessions to make them fit in with your training and your ability. So let's start off with the shorter, faster sessions. For me, this is anything half marathon pace or quicker, and I find that these are really important for just lifting that ceiling, because really you can't run a marathon at faster than your half marathon pace. So if you try and bring up that half marathon and that 10k, the idea is that you've got more space to bring up the marathon pace. In my marathon training, the shorter sessions generally add up to somewhere between 6 miles and 10 miles, and I'll run them once a week. The first session, and the one that I used most often in my most recent marathon block, is 2x3k, 3x2k and 4x1k. For this I'll take 3 minutes recovery after the 3ks, 2 minutes recovery after the 2ks and 90 seconds recovery after the 1ks. I usually try to run the 3ks in this session about half marathon pace, and then I can just sort of progress as the session goes. And if I'm having a good day, I can get beyond 10k pace in the 1ks. And this is like a really good 10 miles of volume at half marathon pace or quicker. The long recoveries really allow you to push on, run fast, and not really feel the effects of it the next day necessarily. If you want to edit this session to fit your training, you could just take one rep off each of the distances. So 3k, 2x2k, 3x1k, and just keep the recoveries the same, because the recoveries are already quite long and should allow you to really hit the pace that we're going for here. Next up is another session where the reps get shorter as the session goes on, and this is 6 sets of 3 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute with 1 minute jog recovery. This session is more at the top end of the speed that I'm going to be targeting in a marathon block. I'll usually start off the 3 minutes about 10k pace, and by the 1 minute I'm getting down to even 5k pace or a little bit quicker if I'm feeling good. The good thing about this session is that you can run fast, but you can also get some good volume in as long as you're keeping the jogs pretty honest. Although 6 sets is only 36 minutes of hard running, the one time that I actually did this session, I got 10.5 miles of running in, just because there's so many jogs in there where you're still moving. For me, this session and sessions like this came only at the end of the marathon block, maybe about 4 weeks out from the marathon. And this is because I kind of realised that all the paces that were quicker than marathon pace felt really quick, and I was kind of struggling with them a bit. So I just added in this session a few weeks before the marathon, did it a couple of times just to give myself a little speed boost. I think in hindsight this is a good thing to keep in every few weeks throughout the block, just to make sure that you're really touching on that quicker pace and you're not going to get to the marathon finding that it's quite quick. This session can quite easily be modified by just removing a set or two, doing 4 sets of it or even 5 sets of it. Another way that can make it a little bit easier is adding a set recovery. So as I said, I'm just taking a minute straight through after every rep. But if you take 3 minutes between sets and that allows you to just get the quality in, running at the speed that you're trying to run at, then that's still going to be a really good session and one that helps bring on your marathon a lot. The next type of session that we're going to talk about are the more marathon specific sessions. So we're going to start off with long float sessions. For me, this is like the bread and butter of marathon training. I absolutely love a long float session. They're like my favourite thing to do, and they're great because they can allow you to run a lot of volume at a little bit quicker than marathon pace, but they don't absolutely kill you for like the next week of training. Doing these float sessions really consistently was something that I only added in my most recent Valencia block. Before this block, I maybe did them 4 or 5 times, but in the Valencia block, I was doing them every week, every Friday pretty much, getting out and doing some kind of long float session. And I felt like it made just a massive difference to my fitness because I was getting up over 30k almost every week in the block. There's probably a lot of ways to define a long float session, but when I look back at my training, they can be put into 2 clear groups. So the first is the type that I used a lot more at the start of the block, which coincided with me being in Font Romeu altitude training. These involve a lot more easy running than floats, and an example of this type of session would be 3 miles easy, 5 miles at marathon pace, 1 mile threshold, 1 mile marathon pace, 3 miles easy, 5 miles at marathon pace, 1 mile at threshold, 1 mile at marathon pace, and finishing up with 2 miles easy. So that's 22 miles of running, but only 14 miles at marathon pace or a little bit quicker. These sessions are best used when you're already at the long run volume that you want to be at. For a few weeks before this marathon block, I was already running up to 2.5 hours easy. So doing a session like this, where you've still got 8 miles of easy running, was a really good bridge between easy long runs and long hard float sessions, which is what we're going to talk about now. So long hard float sessions are where you're going out and running pretty far. You're doing quite a lot of running around marathon pace, maybe a little bit quicker, but you're not actually doing any easy running in there. You're using your recoveries to just run a bit slower, but you're not jogging. The best example of this session from my Valencia block was 7k, 6k, 5k, 4k, 3k, 2k, with 1k float recovery, which adds up to 33k or just over 20 miles of total volume. Now this is just one example of a session like this, but you can really use any rep distance that you want. It just kind of depends on what you're going for and where you are in the block. Like you can do 10 by 1k on with 1k float, or 7 by 2k on with 1k float, or 6 by 3k with 1k float. Like it's a really good way to just be like, okay, how far do I want to run? How much of it do I want to be at marathon pace? Okay, what session are we going to do here? And really just progress it as the block goes on. The important things to keep in mind when you're doing a session like this are, one, it's continuous, you're running the whole time, you're not getting any recovery. And two, the floats are not jogs. You're running them somewhere around 30 seconds per K slower than your reps. So for example, if I'm doing this session and I'm running the 7k around marathon pace, which in this block was about 310 per K, then I'm running the next float at 340 or slightly quicker. And then if I get down to say 303s for the 3k, then I'm bringing that next float down to like 333 or a little bit quicker. And you just need to stay disciplined with this because the floats are as much part of this session as the hard parts. If you do these sessions right, they can be massive confidence boosters. Because you're able to run a huge bulk of this session at marathon pace or quicker, and the floats aren't that much slower and they don't take up that much of the total volume, you're able to finish these and run like 20 miles close to your average marathon pace, and there's recoveries in there. So if you get them right, if you pace them right, if you're fit, obviously, they're going to be good confidence boosters. Finally, I'm going to talk about the hard long run. I'm going to give two examples of these because I think they're both equally important. However, you should not be doing these too often. I would say even just once each per marathon block is more than enough because you have to get the other stuff in as well. And if you're doing a really hard long run that takes you like a week or even 10 days to recover from, then you're not going to get the other training in that's important towards your marathon. So first is the long run at marathon pace. For me, when I've done this in the past, it's been 25k at marathon pace. Interestingly, I did not use this type of long run in my Valencia build, and I prioritised more the long float sessions that I spoke about already. But I think that if you can fit this in, and if you're able to do it, it can be a really good confidence booster. Like just going out on your local cycle track by yourself, untapered, running 25k at marathon pace is proof that you can run a lot further than that when you're tapered and in a race. Obviously there's the flip side to that where you can't do it, but then you have to keep in mind that you're on your own, you're on your local cycle track, you're untapered, and just take the really good fitness boost that you're going to get from doing something like this. The good thing about these hard long runs is that you can just cut a few K or a few miles off of them and still get a really good training benefit. Like I'm running this 25k around 77 minutes. So if you're going to go out and do like 75 to 80 minutes at marathon pace, that's going to be really, really good for the fitness, for the confidence, and I do think it's a really good thing to be doing. Next, we've got the long run that everyone seemed to love when I posted a video of, and that's the longer, more steady run. So in the Valencia build, I did 45k at 20 seconds per mile slower than marathon pace. So that's 45k, 28 miles at about 5:30 per mile. This was something that I'd never done before. I'd never even considered going further than a marathon before, but this was a massive confidence boost for me. It just proves that you can run the distance, and even though the pace isn't what you'd be running on race day, running the distance without any stomach issues, any cramp issues, any issues at all is just massive for the confidence. Do I recommend that everyone includes this in their training? Absolutely not. I felt so prepared for this. I'd been doing a lot of miles. I'd done 40k's faster in previous marathon builds and still did not recover well from this. It was like a week of easy running afterwards just because I could not session. I tried to session about 4 days later and was pretty useless. So this is not something that everyone should do, because if you can't recover from this, then it's just pointless. But again, if you run to time, if you go out and you run 2 hours to 2.5 hours at 20 seconds per mile slower than marathon pace, it's going to be such a good training stimulus. But you need to make sure that you're recovering from it. At least 3 days where you're not running hard afterwards, and really make sure that you're fueling before, during and after. So that's that for my favourite marathon sessions. Again, don't just do these. Make sure you're easy running in between. Make sure you're changing them to fit in with your life and your training. And at the end of the day, you're just trying to hit all the paces from 10k pace to 20 seconds a mile slower than marathon pace. And all of that together is going to get you hopefully to where you want to be in the marathon. So I hope this helped, and if you have any questions, please just leave them in the comments. All of my training is on Strava if you want to have a better look at this and get a better idea of where these sessions fit into training. But yeah, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you got any benefit from this, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.